This time, Unknown Not the Mind Probe, episode number 67, Peace of Mind Control.
Welcome to No, Not the Mind Probe. That was like God. Is a God.
Yeah.
God. Is that what's God? That folks. That's what God sounds like. Just take that.
That's not it. Like
put that
God
in the bank.
from like the Ten Commandments, that movie. Like Moses. Like it was sort of like that.
Moses. It was Jerry Lewis played God in the Ten
Oh,
Commandments.
Moses, with the tablet.
Lady. But if God were here, and he may be around us. I don't know. He would be telling you
Think
to
about
shut
it.
up. He'd tell you to shut up and listen. This is a podcast where we watch and rank every single Doctor Who episode ever. And we should take a moment because obviously it's in the news, it's in the tabloids,
yes.
and you're hearing, obviously you're hearing it in our voices to recognize that I'm wearing contact lenses now. Which is obviously really, I think, affecting the audio quality of the show. I'm not wearing my glasses.
God rest the soul of your glasses.
Yeah, they're still around because I can't get them in my eyes very well. Because basically, apparently, contact lenses, I don't know if you've ever worn them, you just poke your eyes with things.
I could never do that.
Yeah, it's taken a lot of effort. Also, the Queen is dead.
Sorry,
I should re-say that came off a little lighter than I was going for.
By the way, the Queen's dead.
Did you hear about her? Queen Elizabeth.
You started that's with the tone of like, George got a different job.
Did you hear about that?
Jobs. Yeah, did you know that?
But Queen Elizabeth II has passed away. Again, if you get your news from this podcast, we're letting you know. Sorry about breaking it so callously. Tying it in, she was a Doctor Who fan. So Buckingham Palace several times requested the DVDs from the BBC of the new series.
And the BBC was like, "No, we destroyed them all immediately."
Whatever. We don't believe in the Queen. No, she visited the BBC many times, and apparently there's a story of her going there at one point and refusing to leave until she saw the studios where Doctor Who was being recorded. She's like, I want to go see where Doctor Who's made. And this is like in maybe the 70s or something like that. She was around for 70 years. She visited a couple times.
Yeah.
She did not, as far as we know, make any cameos in the series. And she may have been a Dalek. She may have just rolled on screen as like a Dalek, and everyone bowed. It was weird when everyone bowed to the Dalek, and everyone was like, I don't know what that's about. But then it just kind of happened. But so yes, heartfelt condolences to our friends and countrymen in the UK. An institution passing, and we take a moment.
I think we have to speak to the fact that you were not named king.
I was not. No, I passed over her Doctor, the 14th Doctor, and King. It's kind of been a rough summer.
It's a rough summer.
I really thought one or the other would come through. When they both happen, you're just like, ugh.
And that's what I told you at the time. And I was like, look, just keep both irons in the fire. Like, you know, just keep it out there. I don't know.
I said, I was like, I should withdraw from the running for King.
No.
If I could, and really focus on the 14th Doctor Who. But, it may cost me. I was saying to Mike, I was like, well, I've moved up a little in the rankings, and he's like, I was like, my family came from Scotland in the 1600s, so we're distant, we're way out there, but I'm at least one closer to the top than I was. Eventually it might come down if a lot of people abdicate. It might come down to me.
If there's a mass abdication,
you don't know, don't know. And Scots, we have a weird relationship with the crown.
That's actually what. There was a mass abdication event. That's what killed the dinosaurs.
They all just abdicated. But if they hadn't, they would be tuning into this podcast and they would be wondering, hey, what's his name? And I would say, my name is John Grant.
Right.
And I am a lifelong Doctor Who fan. I've been watching it for 37. Absolutely amazing. 36 amazing. 1 year.
Yeah. My name is Porter Mason. John has been asking me to watch Doctor Who alongside him for 25 years, and I said no, and then a year or so ago finally said yes. And in this podcast, each episode of the podcast, we look at 2 Doctor Who stories. We go through the 21st century Doctor Who series in order, and then John acts as our sommelier, and he pairs that
I
newer
swirl the
Who.
current episode around in a glass, sniff the bouquet,
Right.
and try to find a similar bouquet from the 1970s.
That's right. What are we watching this episode?
Well, this episode we are moving forward, at least chronologically in the Matt Smith series. If it doesn't, we haven't
can
really
have a
advanced
plot
the
move
plot for a while.
at the very end, kind of. Anyway, we'll talk about
twist, yeah. We're looking at the God Complex, which is Matt Smith and as the 11th Doctor and Rory and Amy. And it deals with fears. Like, what are your fears? And so we've paired that with a John Perry. It's been a while since we have a 3rd Doctor. Well, no, actually, it's only like 2 of us. But we went through a drought of John Pertwee, and now we're moving into a monsoon of Pertwee.
A rich vein of
3rd
Pertwee.
Doctor, Joe Grant, Porter's favorite, the Master. Porter texts me regularly and says, "Hey, when will there be more Master stories?" And I say, "Hang on, they're coming." Brigadier, Benton, Yates. Just a cavalcade of Doctor Who stars in the mind of evil.
All right, so let's start with the New Who. We mentioned this is the God Complex. It's Matt Smith. It's the whole gang, and this is episode 11 of series 6 of the New Who. It aired on the 17th of September 2011. And it's one episode, a little bit longer. Have they all been longer? This is 50 minutes, or usually 45. Anyway, so we have a clip here, and I'm gonna set this up. Here we go. Here you go. Here's a clip.
You are a medical doctor, aren't you? You haven't just got a degree in cheese making or something.
No. Well, yes, both actually. I mean, there is no cause. All his vital organs simply stopped, as if the simple spark of life, his loves and hates, his faiths and fears were just taken, and this is a cup of tea.
Of course, I'm British. It's how we cope with trauma.
Oh.
That and tutting.
But how did you make it?
All hotels should have a well-stocked kitchen, even alien fake ones. I heard you talking when you arrived. Look, it's no more ridiculous than Howie's CIA theory or mine.
Which is?
This is Jahannam.
You're a Muslim.
Don't be frightened.
You think this is hell?
The whole 80s hotel thing took me by surprise, though.
Yeah. What I picked this quote for, or this clip, was because, obviously, as soon as he starts to become close to a person, like, oh, they're going to die. It's like when someone on Criminal Minds or NCIS suddenly starts dating someone. You're like, well, they're either a murderer or they're about to have their head cut off.
And that was the lovely Rita that you're.
Yeah, it was Rita. Yeah, she's great.
So, okay, so here's what happens. The gang arrives on I think we already knew it was some alien thing, right?
They didn't think it was Earth.
They didn't think it was Earth, right?
It was looking pretty earthy.
But right when he got there, he was amazed. He was like, this is great. They recreated Earth. This is they've really, attention to detail is great. They made this crappy, like, dodgy hotel in the 80s. And then we find, when we get there, what's going on is it feels like one of those Doctor Who's that's like a Twilight Zone or a modern day a Black Mirror episode, where they're caught in this hotel, and what seems to be happening is this nightmare is happening where there's a room in this hotel for everyone in the world, it feels like, and in your room it will have your greatest fear in it, and this drives people insane, essentially, who are there. And once they go insane, they sort of their mind goes over to whatever is running this hotel, and they start to say, praise him, and that's when they sort of get lost. Now, as we move, we don't know, they're dead or they're just missing. We don't know what's happening.
It's a mystery.
As they meet up, the Doctor and Amy and Rory get there, and they meet these folks. We just met Rita, and then there's Joe and Howie. I feel there was a 4th one that died very early on, but at any rate, These are the
guy who
humans,
was already tied up, right?
right?
And
Okay.
then there's also the mole guy.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Gibbous.
So right, that's right. It's not all humans there, but there are humans. Are the others all human other than that guy,
Yeah,
the mole
everybody
guy?
else is human, I think. Yeah, he's a
Always human,
Tivolian.
always
Is the other
running into
guy.
humans, ever humans. Any rate,
Around.
they've kind of stayed alive, or and so they become like part of this party here, the doctor and Rory and Amy. And we find that these have been people who have just been kind of like were living their lives somewhere and then just got plucked into this thing. And then we also start to find out about halfway through that what's roaming around, there's like a monster roaming around, and I think we see it. Is it almost near the end when we see it? But it looks like a minotaur.
Yeah. It's got horns and that thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we found out more. That's like, oh yeah, you see your worst fears in this room. The doctor has this theory of like we have to. I forget there's a misdirection that he says we have to face our fears to get to it.
Right. It's not fear, or it's attracted by if you face your fears, but then it turns out he's wrong.
Right, he's wrong, and it's that you have to.
You turn to your faith.
Why am I mixing this up? Yeah,
you turn to your faith to combat your fear, and it's the faith that attracts it ultimately, I think.
Right. Okay. So yeah, and I don't know that that's ever fully. It's one of those deals. It's like a Sixth Sense moment where you're like, oh, and you're like, wait, would I rewatch that? Would that make sense given what you just said? I'm not sure it would.
And it ends. It
related,
recreates a scene basically from your favorite episode, the Chris of Fenric, where he breaks Amy's faith. Right, it's Amy's faith that's attracting it, and he has to be like, "Stop having faith in me. I'm
right." So
terrible.
Amy falls under the right. So the end of this is Amy falls under. Well, all these. By the way, all these people we mentioned along the way, they die, including Rita, who I'm going to add to our list of she could have been a companion because one of the things
the intent, I think. Yeah,
I kind of knew enough that. I don't think I was like, I don't think she ends up being a companion, but I thought to your point of saying, well, they became close, so she's gonna die. I was also thinking like, oh, are they setting this up that maybe this is a companion, or is it just one of those end of the storyline feints of like, hey, maybe she could be, but it's not happening. Anyway. They all die, and Amy gets taken over by the alien, or whatever this is at its core. We get to this thing where the doctor's saying, "Don't think about your fear, face your fear." I forgot the strategy, but to your point, he's like, "No, I was wrong. It's not your fear. It's when you have an extreme belief or faith in something, it is attracted to that, or like it eats that. It and Amy's faith this whole time is in the doctor. She keeps saying it throughout the whole thing. Even in moments where it's like he's clearly not like, oh, he's gonna save us. He's gonna come back and save us. Like, well, those two just died. So, and yes, he breaks her faith in him and says, I'm just a dude. Come on. And then the very end, where I was going to say,
I'm just a dude.
Just a dude, man. If Keanu Reeves should be the doctor, by the way, at some point, then that would be great.
It's one of the great injustices of casting over time. Yeah.
So they take. So I would say the tiny way the plot moves forward here, this is a diversion, but at the very end, he drops Amy and Rory off and says, like, I think you guys should go. I think that this is too dangerous. I don't. Now that begs the question of why this time. There's many other times, but it's been way too dangerous. They've literally died, both of them, I think once or
several
twice.
Times.
So, but for whatever reason, he finally really gets him this time, and he's like, I can't handle it.
I think
Get out of here, you crazy kids.
Yeah, it's like the end of Harry and the Hendersons, and he's like, go away, get away. I don't love you anymore.
Get out of here. Nobody wants you.
No,
by the way, it's really funny you said that because I was literally about to reference that, and I was like, that's kind of weird. That yes, that's exactly what I thought.
That's why we're friends.
Nobody wants you here. John Lithgow. Sorry, quick aside. Yeah. Great.
Good doctor.
Be a great doctor.
Yeah, I would love. And he's been Churchill, so he's already basically English.
Right.
Yeah, this is a. I think. So I think. I agree that it's not set up enough for him to be like, no, now it's too dangerous. I think the title is supposed to be the giveaway. I think it's called the God Complex in reference to him. And
Right.
sort of he's the the God that they have faith in, and blah blah blah. I wanted that spelled out a little bit more, but I think Rory kind of confronts him on it, and I think there's a couple lines around. I actually like the call out at one point, because it is, if you watch crime shows or other things like that, it's like they introduce some character, the main character likes that character, and it's like, well, they're either going to stay on or be murdered because we're trying to get us to like them. And Rory says at one point, he's like, oh, whenever the doctor starts to get close to someone, I have this urge to contact their next of kin or something like that. And then he kind of says, Amy doesn't say anything, and he kind of says, oh, I've said that before, and you hit me with your shoe or something like that. And it's like, so there are signaling these changes that Amy's starting to distance a little bit from the doctor, and sort of going to this. I want it needed a little bit more, I feel like, to get the payoff. I think the thing I wanted from this more was, it's basically the Shining Hotel, right? I mean, the
It looks a
hallways
lot like it, yeah.
and so I thought, I was like, if you're going to evoke that, and I grant you, I've never actually seen all of The Shining at once. I've seen most parts of it. It's got to be scarier. I want it to be a little scarier, right? It's like, all right, like if you're evoking one of the apparent horror classics of our time, well, you better be scarier than a clown sitting on a bed. Like a few other things that
I thought it was creepy.
It was creepy, but I want to. It's like, be scary. Like, I mean, come on. It's, one of the things we've tried to rewrite the conventions of Doctor Who, and Doctor Who's always been a little scary, but it's never really gone too all out horror. And I grant you, we just had the episode with the kid. The Night Terrors episode, right? So we've just had sort of a creepy horror episode. So maybe it actually does feel a little bit repetitive to that in some ways. Did you recognize the mole man, the Tivolian?
No.
It's David Williams from Little Britain.
Oh,
right.
He's always in makeup.
He's quite good. Apparently, very funny, of course, in person. And they had a lot of struggle. Apparently, Matt Smith could not take him seriously. Just kept laughing because he had makeup on. I get that. I think it is a weird story in that it continues to not. We've had this huge setup at the beginning of the season about the doctor dying, and we got to not tell him, and blah blah. And it again does not mention it at all. Basically, ignores the storyline altogether, and is sort of tries to set up sort of this whole creepy scenario and stuff like that, which is interesting. But again, it's like, well, shouldn't we move this a little bit forward? And then of course you do get the moment of the doctor's room, right? He opens the door and looks in, and it's supposed to be his greatest fear. And he kind of looks at it, and then he's like, of course, what else would you be? And then closes the door, and of course we don't see it. Which is, I get. We'll talk about that in the themes, but I get it.
As always, I'm just going to assume it was Rose for some reason. I don't know.
It's just Rose in a Halloween. It's just Rose with Dracula fangs. And she's like,
I have a couple quick asides. First of all, I did not know that was David Williams.
Yeah.
And I just looked him up just to check in on him. And I did not know that David Williams has written and sold like 50 million children's books.
Yes, he has written.
I did not know that. Secondly, the young woman who plays Rita looks so familiar to me the whole time. And I was trying to think why. And she was in the HBO show The Night Of. I don't know if you ever saw that. It was good with Riz Ahmed. That was kind of Riz Ahmed's big breakout role.
I wanted to see it. I feel like I wanted to see it, but I never did. But
we were just discussing this in the pre-show, Patreon exclusive pre-show chat in the green room, and about a show that you don't want to get into because, like, am I going to have to get into this for 80 episodes? The Night Of, they only had one series, and it was something like 8 episodes. In fact, it was disappointing. You ended being like, I want to know what else happens. But
that's like, probably right.
That's good. That's a good way to end it. But anyway, she was in that. And then she's in a bunch of other stuff more recently. But yeah,
she's great. She's great. And you're just like, oh, I'd watch her. And I think that is again, you watch it and you're kind of like, and we'll talk about this actually in a couple episodes. But it's like we know so much about behind the scenes of Doctor Who. Or at least some of us do. You can keep up. It's in the tabloid, everything else. So you'd know if she was going to be a companion, you'd know, right? You'd hear about it. They're like, oh, they've cast it. We know. And I think by this point, I don't know. I think by this point we weren't 100% sure, but we were starting to expect that at some point Amy and Roy were going to leave. But it's like, oh well, if they're going to, that would have been announced, and we would have heard about a new companion, and we haven't heard about this chick, so she obviously gonna die, or something's gonna happen to her. She's not gonna be around. So that's kind of it's interesting, and as we'll talk about in the future, but it's like this interesting like your knowledge of behind the scenes. And how it plays into what you expect or anticipate on screen is very interesting. But it's like, I mean, it's classic. Like as soon as the doctor says something like, and I do appreciate that they acknowledge it on screen. But as soon as the doctor says, "Oh, I'd like you, and you'd be great companion," like, oh, they're gonna fall in a wheat thresher or something. Yeah, well, too bad. And then you have honestly, I had forgotten because huge spoiler that they are not gone forever. I had forgotten that they did Rory and Amy sort of stepped off the TARDIS here. And it does kind of come out of left field. Like he's like, oh, well, here you go. Here's a house and a car. Good luck. It disappears.
I like that Rory sees as like, oh, great, and we get a car. Like he's like fine with the whole thing. He's sad that he left without saying goodbye, but he's like, "This is great." Like,
it's like I put in my time, and I've died several times, and now I get to do this. And I like it is playing with. I think I wish it played it up a little more in many ways. It's like it is playing with this idea of like in the past, companion exits have always been. Mel's like, I'm just gonna leave now and go with Glitz, or Sarah Jane is like, you can't go to Gallifrey with me, or they've always been unexpected, right? It's like, oh well, this is it. And it's rare that he's like, I've decided you're leaving, I've set you up to leave, and here is your leaving, goodbye. And again, as I say, this is obviously not the final farewell, but it is actually a little jarring. It's like, oh, wait, they're not dead, or their lives aren't ruined, or they're not left on the middle of an alien planet.
Right.
That's weird. So it was an interesting little take. I think, but again, I think it's undercut by the fact because we know so much about behind the scenes that we're just like, well, we know you're not gone. We know you still got to deal with the fact that he was killed in front of you. 10 episodes ago or whatever. So we know we're going to be back. But it is, I mean, in many ways you think about it, it's like, okay, well, they were apart from him at the beginning of the season. So it is setting up how that happens. But you got to keep that in mind. And again, that was 11 episodes ago. And we haven't really talked about it much since that happened. So
no.
Yeah. Anyway, interesting.
I want to move on to the classic episode. And I'm going to mention one other thing just because this was random when I opened up Amara Karan's Wikipedia page. Her film debut was in the Darjeeling Limited. I don't remember. I mean, when I see the picture, I remember her in it.
That.
I guess that was her first film role. But weirdly, her character's name in that movie was also Rita. Like, I just find that bizarre. What does it all mean? What does it all mean? And David Williams was also a mole in that movie. All right, we're going to move on to our classic episode.
I will. Just a quick David Williams thing. I will throw this out. Graham Norton, the Graham Norton show is brilliant. If you ever watch it, and there's a fantastic episode of the Graham Norton show, which is Tom Hanks, Peter Capaldi, and David Williams. Tom Hanks, for those who aren't aware,
actor,
has won many Oscars.
Raconteur.
And Peter Capaldi, as maybe people aren't aware, won the Oscar for Best Short Film. The same year that Tom Hanks won for one of his things.
Wow.
So, and Graham Norton, they put them all on the couch at the same time. So it's all three of them. It's a very entertaining conversation. You can find it on YouTube. But the best part is that, like, basically, Tom Hanks and Peter Capaldi are talking about the experience of being at the Oscars and what it's like to win and you go backstage and all that. David Williams just kind of sitting there. And at one point, Graham Norton goes, "Now, David, have you ever?" And he goes, and David Williams just goes, "Are you going to say, have you ever won an Oscar?" He's like, "I don't know. I think so, maybe." And then there's lengthy, more discussion about the Oscars. And then at one point, Dave Williams just interrupts and goes, "Well, I think we've had enough of the Oscar talk. If we could just draw a line under that." It's a very fun, and he's obviously playing up to the other. It's very funny. But yes, he just the takeaway is he's never won an Oscar. But anyway, classic Doctor Who. Yeah.
Sad for him. happy for us.
But
for
back
some
to
reason.
Oscar-winning 1970s.
Oscar-winning
Yeah.
John Pertwee in season 8, and more importantly, Oscar-winning what's the man's
Roger
name?
Delgado. Yeah.
Roger Delgado, definitely winning Oscars, definitely going for an Oscar. At all times, at every moment.
He's selling it. He's selling it.
This is season 8, story number 2. It aired January 30th to March 6th, 1971. It is 6 episodes, 6 25-minute episodes, and this is story number 56. And we have a little clip here that John put together. I'll play it right now.
Funny unit.
All right, Doctor. You win.
You'll back up my report to the Home Office calling for a complete ban on the colour process.
Yes.
You'll get in touch with the Home Secretary and make sure that he takes some action.
Yes, Doctor, and if that doesn't do any good, I personally will go down to Stanmore and blow the...
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to play that clip again. I don't know what happened there.
All right, Doctor. You win.
You'll back up my report to the Home Office calling for a complete ban on the colour process.
Yes.
You'll get in touch with the Home Secretary and make sure that he takes some action.
Yes, Doctor, and if that doesn't do any good, I personally will go down to Stanmore and blow the blasting machine up myself. Now, are you or are you not going to help me with this case?
My dear Lethbridge Stewart, your word is my command. You know that you only have to ask.
Thank you.
Well, where on earth do you think you're going?
We are going to see the new Chinese delegate, Mr. Fu Peng.
Fu Peng? He must be Hokkien.
No, Doctor, he's Chinese. Now, come along.
Excuse me.
Later.
Yes. It's going to be one of those days. Cheshire Cat, Captain Yates. Cheshire Cat.
Doctor!
Yes, I'm coming.
Good classic Brigadier.
Yeah. Oh, this is a great Brigadier episode.
Yeah, he's a lot. I knew the master would be balanced out by your love of the Brigadier.
Totally. So, spoiler alert, because I don't have a command of which stories had the master in it. I wanted to rank this my highest master episode, but I don't know if I did because I don't remember the other master episodes by name. Later, we can look through my rankings and see. I believe
I can do an analysis. I can run the computer in my head on it.
So, as we mentioned, we have the third Doctor. We have Joe Grant. Everybody loves Joe Grant, and we have the Brigadier. We have also from Unit
Yates, yeah. Yates gets a big role, and Benton is Sergeant.
Benton,
Corporal Bell and Major Cosworth are both secondary, but also they pop up every once in a while. But the sort of beloved unit side characters. But we got a full on unit.
I know, it's great.
Sounds dirty to say that.
I really wish. And actually, here you want something. If we wanted like a Netflix show or reboots, like I just want a spin-off unit series, and just, kind of like Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and just like, let's have unit. And
so it's been we haven't gotten to them yet. So yes, that has been contemplated many times. And in a few episodes we'll get to a new unit. And Big Finish has, of course, spun them off. And there is a unit series, and it's very good. And it's the new unit people, but then they've also brought back Benton and Yates and other people as the old unit people, and they brought back Mbira from the Seventh Doctor one, and they've done a lot of cool stuff with it. But yes, a unit spinoff. Right. There was like, this would be a great. Why we didn't? Again, who knows? Under one of the speculation about why RTD came back, Russell T Davies came back, is he wants to do a Marvel universe, and it's like, oh yeah, maybe there'll be a unit spinoff and other things like that. Maybe. But anyway, many of them are dead, but those were not because.
Well, so we'll talk about this episode, but I just wanted to mention and then I don't even know that it was like then I ranked this episode and I didn't rank it that particularly highly, but I think this era does such a good job. Mainly because they're completely earthbound. They can do a lot of location film shooting.
Yeah.
And they mix that so well with filming on the sets. And the way this era is shot is just, it's really fun to watch and really enjoyable. And, the music is fun, but not overwhelming as it gets a little bit later. Mm-hmm. It's not too taken out. You don't get taken out by, kind of terrible costumes, which I know are fun and part of the charm sometimes, but like anyway, this era I think is really fun to watch. So we start off, and the Third Doctor and Joe are sent over to a nearby prison to observe. They have a new way of dealing with the criminals at this prison, and the Doctor is very impetuous during the presentation of this
It's kind of a jerk.
process. Yeah,
You shut up and let the man talk.
yeah. There's the scientist there showing off this device, and the Doctor's just interrupting him constantly. And this wonderful device, which has been developed by the brilliant Dr. Emil Keller. And what the machine ostensibly does is it turns like this hardened criminal into like a child. And then what we start to realize is what and then of course they're showing off this machine and immediately like kills 2 or 3 people, but they're like, "Guys, it's fine. We're working out the kinks, but it's fine."
That happens it happens when you get new cable people. 1 or 2 people always die.
But what it seems to do is it brings up people's linking theme. It seems to bring up people's worst fears,
Exactly.
and then
It's like I know what I'm doing.
either those fears come to life or just the mania of it drives the person to death. I think probably the latter, but it feels when we're watching it like this thing is actually real, right?
Yeah, this would be
Yeah.
an area where they clearly hadn't quite decided what they're doing, because at one point, I think the guys had a fear of water and drowning, and they're like,
Right, and
"Oh,"
yes, right.
but he had water in his lungs,
Right,
and
he
it's kinda
he
like,
said the doctor not the a medical doctor examined him and
Yeah.
said, I don't understand it, but he had water in his lungs."
right, and you're just kinda like, "Well, wait, what so wait, is it convincing him he's drowning, and then his body is producing water that goes in?" Because but then there was another guy who was afraid of rats, and he had scratches on his face, but when you see it, it's like rats didn't come out of the walls, and so this would be one of the many areas where it's clear that production didn't quite know what it was doing, but yes.
Right. So, okay. So what's going on? So, by the way, meanwhile, this is also why I love this era. It has a great bit of unit and British patriotism thing where there's the first ever World
World
Peace
peace,
Conference,
yep.
of course, run by Britain, and happening
Mhm.
there. And then what's happening in tandem with that is that they're basically they're going to sign some nuclear arms treaties, and well, it's actually they don't even, well, anyway,
There's a
they're going to sign
gas
some
missile, but yeah,
demilitarization
terrible
treaties,
big missile, yeah.
and they say, "Oh, so what's going on?" Well, we're this enormous, one of the best missile in the world, and then they go, "British, of course." It's so ridiculous how they're still seeing themselves as like, well, of course we're the best in the world at everything, and that's
No
quite clear. It's
question.
like, well, all right. At any rate, this World Peace Conference is happening. These missiles are being moved around to be decommissioned as a show of good faith for the peace conference, and it's mentioned and sort of that pipe is laid very clearly. It's like, wow, clearly we're going to be involved in this soon. So what we find out is Emil Keller, the invention of this Keller machine that's doing this is in fact the master.
A little
Now
music
is
thing.
Keller German for master or something?
Yeah,
I'm
I
surprised that
feel like they
didn't come
haven't
up.
quite figured that out yet, and it's not. But I do enjoy how such unit, which is a super secret
Yes.
military organization in this house, which at every other episode has been in the middle of the country, but now is suddenly in the middle of London. And there's a guy doing telephone repair, and just out in the front of it, and no one just and tapping the wires. And no one's like, "Hey, should we check what that guy's doing? Is he authorized here?" No, just messing around, and it's the master in disguise in a big rubber mask,
yeah.
listening in on the conversation. I'm like, oh, it's not a very secure organization.
One of my favorite things, which is done in like comedy things, making fun of this, but also old movies, is always done with the master is obviously when he's in disguise is just another actor. But when there's the reveal of like I'm going to pull off this rubber mask that I have, there's a cut or some sort of thing between the real guy and then the mask that's supposed to be just this wonderful, perfect mask, and it's so clearly a rubber mask after the cut. But at any rate, yeah, here he is, and he causes a riot at the prison,
Yeah.
and you start to see his plan unfold, which is I'm going to take over the prison. I'm going to get all these hardened criminals now working for me. One of the job I'm going to give. So they are now running the prison. They put these other guys They captured Joe too.
Yeah.
Then he's going to capture the missile and I guess essentially use it to hold the world hostage, right? Yeah. So the doctor is, wants to put a stop to that. And there's a couple of
And
nice
he said
moments
it that
too.
way. He's like, I'll put a stop to this. Yeah, it's very casual about it.
And there's great doctor unit interplay as to who's going to do what. And then Yates, I think it was Yates, right?
Is
Was
with
the
the
one taken
missile.
prisoner and then wants to go
Yeah.
back. Because there's a great little moment which is also kind of funny in retrospect where he's taken out and kind of knocked out, but he ultimately gets free and he's back in front of the brigadier saying like, sir, I want to go in and run this mission. And he's like, you just had a concussion. I don't think
Oh no,
that's a
that
good
was
idea.
Benton.
Oh, I'm
Benton,
sorry, Benson.
Benton was following the Chinese diplomat and
Yes.
there's some mental attack, and then he goes and reports to the brigadier, and he's like, "I fainted," and the brigadier's like, "You fainted? If this is too much for you, Benton," and yes, this is a whole wonderful. And then Benton's like, "Oh yes, thank you, sir." And it's like, and he's like, "Get out of my sight." It is a
Well,
very this is a Benton arc. Yeah, but yes,
so
Benton's like, "No, I want to do it." Yeah.
there's a whole they're trying to go back in and take back over the prison and take control of the master. There's an interplay there. There's a great Trojan horse sequence
Yep.
where the brigadier dresses up as like a bloke
Yeah,
and puts
delivery
on
man.
his Cockney
His little
accent.
hat, yeah.
And what is he like? You could
Food,
probably
it's food.
recite
I'm
it.
bringing you food. Grub, man.
No, scrub, man.
Look, I
And
can go
then
around and back to my boss, eh? And I'm like,
one of my
come on, man.
favorite. So yeah, right. So he plays that he's just this delivery guy, and the point is to bring in his crack group of like 3 people who are going to take back over the thing. But one of my favorite things is that makes no sense to me is he's driving in a truck. Why doesn't he just drive in the truck with them in the back? Instead, they
They get
drive in and
out.
they're just walking behind the truck. And it works obviously, and they get in.
Yeah.
But one other thing I want to talk about with them because they're doing it, but throughout the whole time earlier when one of the prisoners is holding Joe hostage and he's holding a gun up and also holding one of the medical doctors hostage, and the way Brits use guns is so indicative that they never use guns. Like
Yeah.
they hold them in a very funny way, and they gesture with them a lot in a way that's like.
them.
And I guess I was thinking about why does this look weird to me? It looks off. I like held a gun twice in my life. Why does this look odd to me? But what I know enough about them is that you hold you tend to hold guns if you're actually intended that you're going to fire a gun. First of all, you hold it carefully, but there's a kickback to the gun,
Yeah,
so you don't
right.
just kind of like hold it with like your wrist loose because that would make no sense.
Like a cigarette. Like you're like,
yeah, you're just like hanging around. And they do this even with their rifles. They're just kind of moving around. It's like, no, you need to hold that if you're planning on maybe using it, like they're holding someone hostage or they're breaking in. You'd be ready to brace yourself for using it, and they just are not. They're just kind of walking around with these toy guns. Very funny to me.
Look, they don't have the familiarity that we do with guns as Americans. We all understand it. I mean, like folks, I was at Porter's wedding, and in celebration, we all fired guns into the air.
That's right.
There's like
That's
a little,
right.
hey, he's married now, and then and Porter and Mrs. Probe, they faced off at 10 paces and fired at each other. And when they both lived, they were like, hey, it's a marriage. And I mean,
when it was
like,
time
guns are part of our culture.
When it's time to cut the cake, we just fired the cake. We shot at the cake.
Shot the cake into pieces. Yeah, I mean, it's just,
Anyway,
it's gun culture.
Gun culture. So they take back over the prison. They get in, and then we get to the scene where we see at the end where there's this negotiation to get the master to come out and surrender, and by the doctor saying, "Hey, I'll give you back your circuit so you can get out of here with your TARDIS." And then it's a feint. Oh, but by the way, there's some great Joe Grant action moves earlier where they trick a guy to come in, and she does some karate chops on this dude. There's a lot of action. You mentioned this before. Pertwee wants to be an action star. Well, there's a lot of action, not just him, but there's a lot of like action here.
Yeah, I mean, there's that whole sequence in episode 5 and 6 where they, the Trojan horse thing, but then Unit storms the castle with a reason. I mean, for TV, with a reasonable
Yeah.
number of people. Like,
Yeah.
it's Doctor. Normally, there'd be like 3 people, and they'd come in and like take over this entire thing. It's like, no, they got a reasonable number of troops, and they're going through, climbing up stuff and shooting at people. It was a reasonable action sequence.
So the end of the whole thing is I didn't really mention, but there's one prisoner who kind of
Barnum
is going to Barnum, who's going to escape, and then he kind of gets, you end up, he's the prisoner that you're supposed to kind of, you're endeared to,
Right.
and you like him. At the very end, the master very suddenly runs him over with a car.
Yeah, right.
And Joe has this moment of
Yeah, that's a sad
sadness
moment.
about that, and the master does get away. He's not, I mean, surprise, surprise, he's not trapped by the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And
You gotta come back to the episode. Yeah.
he's gonna come back because he doesn't get the circuit, right? I mean, he's still stuck.
He does get the
Oh, he does.
circuit, and he picks it out of his pocket and then says, but I'll be back. I wanted to destroy this planet." And then you're like,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, there he goes.
Keep happening.
Well, anyway, like I said, this was, I love Unit, and like you said, it definitely did counteract the master stuff. The master still not great, but I liked this plot line better than the other master ones I've seen. And yeah, I thought this was pretty fun. As with most of the 6 episode arcs, it's didn't need to be 6 episodes. Probably could have been 4, something like that. But
It was
yeah,
a
I
little
thought this
fat.
was an enjoyable story, and like I said, I just really like this era.
Yeah, this is by Don Hutton or Hutton, who did Inferno, which is the season 7 story that was very good. And yeah, I like his stuff. This is the second master story. So we just watched Terror of the Autons not long ago. This is number 2. So immediately after the master comes back. It is a very big Unit story. It has a lot of action sequences. It says in all the backstory and history and stuff, and I still am not 100% clear how. That's a real missile. They got the military gave them like they're like hopefully it wasn't fireable, but they were like, yeah, you can have that. We like Doctor Who. So they had that, and they had a helicopter, and they have a lot of stuff. And they have the storming of the prison and stuff like that. This is directed by Timothy Combe, who directed Doctor Who and the Silurians. It went so massively over budget that he was banned from directing Doctor Who ever.
Gosh.
Like the producer was like, "I'm sorry, it's great, but you're way, way over budget." So he never directed Doctor Who again. It's a very convoluted plot in many ways. Like, well, wait, so they're in a prison and it's a machine, and he was going to take over the prison and then use the prisoners to get the missile, and then the missile was going to disrupt a peace conference. It's a lot. But it's slightly saved by, as you say at the end, that Barnum character his evil impulses were wiped in episode 1. It's like a demo of how the thing was going to work, and he just kind of lingers in the background for the next 6 episodes, then becomes the key to solving it, right? Because he has no evil, so the machine can't harm him, and he's how it gets close to the master. And I will give credit to the direction. Because it's just the monster is a box with a little cylinder on it and a little dome with a light, and it just flashes. And
They
the
didn't go
director
over budget on that.
Yeah, the director has to try to make it interesting and scary, and so he just primarily just zooms in and out really quickly on it, like, and it's like, it's like, look how scary it is, and it develops the ability to suddenly like disappear and like appear in other places around the prison at one point, and it's like it keeps developing random abilities to make it scary or something. It's like, all right, well, it's trying. It does, of course, tap into the Doctor's fears, which include sort of a litany of past monsters, many of which you've not seen yet. An Ice Warrior,
with the Daleks,
the Daleks are in there. But then there's also Quillen, who's like this pathetic monster from an early First Doctor, and like the War Machine, which is another. It's like they clearly just had the footage and like, yeah, bung that in there. He's fine. He's terrified of that too. But then what I love is, I think it's a wonderful character moment, is when the master's affected, his greatest fear is the Doctor laughing at him. It's like the big doctor, and he's laughing like ha 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 ha. It's like I think that's a wonderfully written moment, and like explains a lot about the master, right? It's like and his relationship to the doctor, and it's like, oh, the doctor looking down on me and not taking me seriously is sort of my biggest fear. I thought it's a kind of a lovely little character moment that maybe makes the master a little bit more interesting. It's a very violent story. There's a lot of prison breaks, and they're shooting guards, and I think partly, I think anything. I don't know, but I am terrified of going to prison because it could happen at any minute. But like, I wouldn't last long there. I mean, obviously, I know you're supposed to kill someone as soon as you get in there, and I'm ready for that. But I don't, who knows, right? I mean, it's gonna happen. But so there's a gritty realism to being into prison immediately, and then there's like there are several attempts at taking over the prison that fail, and then finally one happens, but they keep killing guards and the warden and all that kind of stuff. It's very violent. And then fun bit of trivia. This is one of the last. So we have the missing episodes from the first and second Doctor. Then this third Doctor comes in, and they switch to color. But then for whatever reason, they also had black and white copies of every episode. And for some reason, they junked some of the color episodes,
Okay.
but kept the black and white. So for a long time in like the 90s and early 2000s, the third Doctor was a mix of color and black and white, depending on what they had. Eventually, they found most of the color ones or recolorized them, but this was the last one because for whatever reason, they couldn't find decent copies of color, whatever. But then what they figured out is that because, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, they had basically black and white copies of color episodes, and that they could use computers and actually look at the pixels, and recorded in the black and white pixel was information about what color it would be.
Wow.
So they were able to extract that and recolorize them. So they look a little weird on BritBox and stuff. But they were actually able to figure out, okay, well, really this was this color, and that information is in somehow, even though it's not showing on the screen, it's in this black and white. So they've restored it. So this is all the Pertwee episodes are now in color through various mechanisms. But
they were generally probably not seen in color.
Yeah, well, so it would have been the early 70s, and so they were made in color, broadcast in color, but they said a lot of people, of course, wouldn't have seen them because people had black and white TVs, right? They didn't have it. So a lot of people, I've seen some reviews or whatever, they're like, some of these, in the Mind of Evil is one that people point to, is like, it might actually work better in black and white. Like, it's a little more creepy, and it might actually, there's some aspect of it that maybe in black and white, it's got a little bit more of a, and I guess we do watch things. It's funny. I was Mike was out of town, Mr. Probe, and when he's away, I order Chinese food because he hates Chinese food, and I watch Alfred Hitchcock movies. So I watched Psycho just recently, and that's another classic one, right? That could have been in color, because I think he'd done North by Northwest and a few others in color, but he specifically did it in black and white. Because the blood, the terrible gory blood scene in the shower
right.
is like, and like, oh no, it would have been too much for audiences to take. And you do watch it, it's like, oh yeah, I don't know this is working color. There's something about it. There's something sort of this cinema verite, like very raw, sort of almost documentary feel to it. He filmed it famously with his TV crew instead of a movie crew to give it. So just again, it's like there's something about it black and white. But anyway, I mean, it's obviously in color now, so it's completely irrelevant to you. But anyway, fun fact that at some point it would have been in black and white. But yeah, I like the scope of it, right? It's got unit and across all these things, and they're doing the peace conference and the missile and stuff like that. It also has, I think, a surprisingly sympathetic depiction of China, right? I mean, like there's they're kind of like, oh, the Chinese diplomats are annoying, but also like the doctors at one, but oh yes, I'm friends with Mao Zedong, and you're just like, oh really? Are you?
Well, and in that sequence, the doctor's made out to be this very diplomatic person, and the brigadier's, as he often is just made to look as just kind of like this dolt.
Yeah, right.
Like
they're all having tea, and he doesn't understand what's going on and stuff like that. Apparently, they had a lot of trouble getting Pertwee to do the Chinese correctly. They had a lot of coaches, and he was not. They had a lot of trouble.
Nah.
That is apparently authentic. But yes, they struggle with it. But yeah, it's interesting, right? It's John Hutton, as I said. So it's like it straddles the earlier season, the Liz Shaw episodes, which are very gritty and realistic, and then this newer, sort of more colorful, Joe Grant master things. And it's like it's kind. You can kind of see it's like it's a little of both, which makes it kind of an interesting transition.
Themes. Listen to the sound of my voice. Themes. You're getting sleepy. Themes. That's the theme song.
That's a good. Yeah, I like that.
We have fun.
It's a good time here.
Listen, let me explain something to you. We're adherents of the repeating themes here at No Not the Mind Probe, and we like to look at stuff that runs through like a very river that runs through our world and our lives and our Doctor Who stories.
We are Brad Pitt and Robert Redford.
What exactly? We're just fly fishing. We're out there with our waders, and one of us is drunk, and I don't remember which, but one of them, and then the other one dies probably. And anyway, Tom Skerritt's involved. John
always is.
What themes are involved in this episode? Mind control, but
mind
what
fear, right?
Fear.
So I think what's interesting about this one, and we've touched on this tangentially or orthogonally,
ooh,
might say, in earlier episodes. So it depicts the Doctor's fears, right? Or it depicts that the Doctor has fears. Which leads me to ask: is the Doctor a superhero? Because we talked about, can the Doctor develop as a character? And answer is no.
Too bad.
The companions can.
We had a good run.
But then it's kind of like, all right, well, should the Doctor be afraid? Or this is my thing: is like, should the Doctor be afraid of things? Or is he a superhero? Which, well, now I'm curious as to your take, because I am, as we've discussed many times, and folks, pause it here, go back over the last 60-something episodes to make sure to catch up. And I know that I'm not a huge comic book
just
person.
give him a second.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You done? Yeah. All right. Good. Welcome back. And it's like, so my sense would be that comic book characters they're Superman, and they're like, I'm afraid of nothing, and occasionally someone lobs some kryptonite at me and I swoon. That's it. But I would have said, like, a superhero is like they always behave. They're not flawed. They always behave correctly. They always do the good thing. They're always a hero. They have no fear. They're brave in the face of everything. And so I guess my question is, do you think the Doctor's the same way? Is it weird to show the Doctor being frightened of something or suggesting that he's frightened of something? Or is it, no, you're the anchor who's brave and everything is cool, and it's your companions or others that are frightened of things? Or does it matter?
Well, I mean, like you said, I don't know. You're not a comic person. I don't know that I'm a superhero person, but my sense of the superheroes are the ones I always liked, which are largely the Marvel ones. They're actually usually always flawed, and most of the plots are usually around whatever they're flawed about, and they do get scared of stuff. And most of the stories are trying to find a way to, they are often, brave and doing all these great things, but most of the plots revolve around the moments where some either a villain or just like circumstances are showing some crack in the facade, and can they overcome it, and then they do or they don't. Like usually they still save whoever, but sometimes there are left at the end of the superhero story being like, well, I saved them, but I'm more broken as a person, whatever. So I don't know, that does seem to be actually a theme of superheroes, that they show that. But the Doctor, I think what's different about the Doctor is he often acts, there are times when he's acted like a hero, and definitely there are a couple moments in the David Tennant and Matt Smith years where it's like he's kind of acting like a superhero here. Like he, you
Mhm.
know, again, a flawed and nuanced one, but that's pretty common for a modern superhero. Superman, by the way, the one you brought up, I think is the exception. And I don't know a lot about Superman, but it always seemed to me that Superman is just invincible, and that like Superman stories are largely about just this. You know, you're just wanting to project yourself onto this perfect thing that's everything's going great for. Yeah, obviously there are weaknesses to Superman, but like I don't know. Like he fits very much in the mold of what you're describing.
Mm.
But in the newer Doctors, there have been moments where he really is acting like a superhero. But I think he works better as not quite an anti-hero isn't like the right totally right for him, but as this sort of agent of chaos, that he's just sort
Yeah.
of there and he's
Unpredictable. Yeah.
lobbing things in from the outside. He is saving people, but um he's not like a do-gooder really in a way for again for a lot of these times.
Mm.
And then I think but in David Tennant and Matt Smith era, he crosses more over into that. And honestly, it matches up a lot with his relationship with the companions. Like they
Mhm.
make him more into a superhero because
Well, they create
they put
yes, they
so
project
much
on him. Yeah.
yeah, because they put so much faith in him, and then he has does have a relationship with them and cares a lot about them, and so he starts to act and do certain things almost as a way of like, I have to live up to what they think of me.
Yeah.
Whereas in some of his past companion relationships, he's just kind of like he could give or take him, and they don't necessarily. I mean, they look up to him, but they don't like look up to him as a hero. So I don't know. That seems to be part of it. But I do think in these modern ones, I don't know if that changes in the future new Doctors. He's a lot closer to a superhero now than I think it was back in these old
Interesting.
classic
Do you
Doctors.
think superheroes in comics are do they have a character flaw, or do they have an Achilles heel, which is like kryptonite, or his parents were murdered in front of him, so he's a little jumpy. Like
I mean, honestly, a lot of them have so the Marvel stuff, I believe this is what
Mhm.
started with Marvel stuff back, but way long time ago, like back in the 60s, 70s, like when Spider-Man, when they started created all these first big Marvel hits, they had both.
Mhm.
Like they're all started with these personal flaws. And that was part of what was unique about them and what drew people to them is like, oh, I can relate to this person more. They're not like just this other, you know, hero that I just want to see punching a bunch of Nazis. I can relate to them. And then yes, they also usually had some kind of like Achilles heel. But they actually they would have both. And then as it went on, some of them were like really flawed. Like a very
Mhm.
popular superhero in the Marvel universe was Wolverine, and he's like killing people half the time and has like a weird sketchy past, but he's sort of like drug into being a hero where it's like,
Mhm.
look, you are here, and they're the people around him are always trying to convince him like, you say you're, you know, not going to be here, but you're actually always saving people. So that definitely does exist.
Yeah.
But the simpler ones like like Superman and I don't
Yeah.
know, maybe the Green Lantern,
They're
but
allergic to gluten, and
what
you're
that
like, "Oh,
yes,
okay,
exactly.
that's I got that.
And
All
that
right,
was
that's
what I was going
simple."
to say is I believe that Marvel thing of having these sort of flawed personalities as well as, you know, some kind of like, well, they don't have every power in the world other than Superman, um has infected over like pretty much all superhero stories are like that now. Like
Mhm.
Batman has a bunch of issues, you know,
Well,
again.
he's a sociopath in a fetish suit who's a
Uh,
vigilante. So yeah, he's got a
yes,
lot going on.
definitely.
Yeah.
Green Lantern. So like the DC stuff has that too now. And I think that's sort of like table stakes of superheroes is that
You got to have something.
they're these flawed people. They have basically it's instead of being like they're this perfect thing, it's they're a person, but we're gonna magnify aspects of them, and
Right.
that makes their flaws more interesting because they're this, you know,
Okay. So
amped up.
what's the doctor do you agree with the God complex that the Doctor's flaw, and this is definitely something that Moffat keeps developing, which is that, and Rory actually has said this even as far back as the Vampires of Venice, where he talks about like you make people want to impress you. uh it's an interesting flaw, right? It's like you're so good, or you
Right.
project that you're so good and noble and willing to sacrifice yourself and all that kind of stuff that you actually make other people want to do that for you who maybe shouldn't, or that's not what they signed up for. Is that his flaw, or what is the Doctor's flaw?
I mean, to the name of the episode, he definitely also just has a god complex. And so that's, I think,
he has lived forever and never dies. So
but he could.
like if I had a god complex and I was like, I have been in the same job for 12 years, people would be like,
Yeah. I guess it's related to what Rory said, but it also maybe this is the same thing, but he also is really very cavalier with his life for the reasons you just said, and because of his infectious personality, well, maybe not all the doctors, but since I don't know, the third one at least, and definitely since the fourth one and on, he sort of rubs off on these people who should have more, like, they shouldn't be so carefree. And I guess that's related to what Rory's saying, but it's slightly different, where it's like this flaw is that it's great that he has this zest for life, but these other people can't do the things that you do, and it's it has resulted in a lot of people dying around
and
him.
that's what I think is actually that fascinating, because of course, sort of the question you ask as a Doctor Who fan is like, well, if you were just walking down the street and the TARDIS materialized in front of you and he got out and was like, come with me, and you'd be like, yeah, but there is sort of it's like I'm thinking like, well, but wait, it's not safe. It's not if Superman picked you up and flew you around like Lois Lane, you'd be like, Superman. And if he drops me, he'll turn the planet backwards and time will go back in time because that's how that works. We'll be fine. But there's a thing about the Doctor. It's like, oh yeah, if you go with him, like, yeah, you could. All of these situations they work out, but you could die easily, and you just got lucky that you didn't. And he's constantly putting you in dangerous situations. Even things like, if you there's sort of these hints that's like, oh, even the TARDIS is dangerous. Like they're just, I might just delete rooms that you're in, or like things could just
Right.
happen to you in it. So like it is not safe at all. And he just throws you into these, and it's not like, I don't know. Again, maybe they've edited this out. But is there a scene after you come on board the TARDIS where you have to sign a waiver and like you get like a outline of all the various
You
things?
should definitely
like,
have to sign an NDA. I
no
imagine.
liability, indemnify for these things. And yeah, so it's like yeah, you're in danger. You're constantly in danger. He is not bringing you into a thing that is safe. And so that's maybe that's the interesting flaw. It's like I really want someone with me. I don't want to be alone. But if you come with me, it's going to be scary and dangerous. And you could easily die at really any moment. And you're frankly
Right.
lucky you don't. And so yeah, I mean um okay, so he's a dangerous superhero.
I think
I
he's a
guess.
superhero. He doesn't. I still don't think he has a clear mandate, um, as to what his like quest and job is, or
That's
maybe you
true.
understand that better than
Like
I.
all
But like,
superheroes are like, I fight for justice and good.
or
My
whatever
parents
it
were
is, yeah,
murdered and I'm
whatever
really
they
upset
are.
about it and I kill bad guys. Like I mean, there's like there's a simple,
Yeah,
there's a one line, a slogan that the
and the
guys.
Doctor is more, and there are superheroes like the Doctor, but like they more have to sometimes get talked into their mission. Like they have to be like, no, you're actually the best one here to help. Like and but it's not always clear. He's not Sam from Quantum Leap. He's not trying to go just like fix things throughout time. Sometimes he does that,
To put
sometimes he
right what once went
doesn't.
wrong, Porter, I believe is the correct
He
term.
does.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
he has, like superheroes, he does have super villains, and he
Mm-hmm.
has the Daleks, and he has that. So
Mm-hmm.
um
But
he's
the
sort of
key
fighting
is
against them.
he's got to know that the next leap could be the leap home. Mm.
Makes you think. All right, John, there are 299 official Doctor Who television stories, though pretty soon after the airing of this, there might
Well,
be.
they're keeping that close to this. They don't want us to know when it is, who's in it, what it's
You said
about.
October, I thought is.
But in October, apparently mid-October, it
Wow.
is now, according to leaked information from Doctor Who magazine, which I have not received my official copy of Doctor Who magazine yet, so I don't know. But the next episode is apparently called "The Power of the Doctor." It's a 90-minute centenary special
What?
with Jodie Whittaker. It's got all the other people. It's got Tegan and Ace, as far as we know. There are some other returning
David
characters.
Tennant?
There may be more. Well, this is the big question. This is the $64 million question. Right?
Sure.
Wasn't it the $64 million pyramid?
I think it was just like
It
64,000.
bankrupted an entire company.
It was 64,000, which now like wouldn't even get you a down payment on a house.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, you'd have to give it back, most of it back. Is who does she regenerate into? And the story is maybe it's not Shuti Gatwa. Maybe it's somebody else, or I don't know. Maybe what if it was just Russell T Davies and he's just like, "Huh, I'm back. Huh?
I am just no, it's just him coming. It was like, I am the Alpha and Omega of Doctor Who. I have everything.
And everyone's like, oh,
No.
yeah.
Well, listen,
But-
there have been
Yeah, we haven't
299
gotten
of these stories. We have ranked 132 of them. We're going to rank 2 more. I will start.
Yes.
So I'll start with the God Complex. I ranked this probably a little higher than you. Honestly, maybe I just was looking down through. I liked the kind of Twilight Zone of it all, and I don't know. I enjoyed it okay. I didn't rank it super high, but it ended up at 38. So right around Planet of the Dead, The Doctor's Wife, some other similar kind of NuWho episodes. Which were they the best? No, but I just liked the people and they were well done episodes. So those end up a little bit higher for me. So 38 for that. For The Mind of Evil, I mentioned before, this was probably, maybe this was my favorite Master episode. So I did some research here while you were gabbing about
blathering
something.
on. Yeah.
And it is true. I have it ranked 78, right in a little Master ghetto,
Yeah.
followed by Terror of the Autons and the Sea Devils. But I did find, as far as I can see, 4 other Masters that I've ranked higher. One is a NuWho, Utopia. That is the highest one
that's a
I've
Master.
ranked. I didn't remember that the Master was in Logopolis.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's the highest old classic Master show I have. The other 2, End of Time, is also NuWho.
Yeah.
I didn't remember the Master being in Caves of Androzani, but maybe
He's
I
not.
just don't.
Why
Why is that listed?
He shows up at the when the Doctor's regenerate. That's the one with the 5th regeneration and the 6th. At the very end, there's the little faces swirling around him.
Okay.
He shows up at the very end. He's like, Doctor.
So really,
not
the
quite
thing
like
here is that Logopolis, I did forget. Now, to Logopolis' credit, one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite Master stories is I think he only comes in like halfway through or something like that.
And there's a lot of other stuff going on in there. Yeah.
But I think this was more of a pure Master story. So I think it kind of holds up. This is my favorite, just like straight ahead. This is a Master story.
Yeah.
Not by much because it's right next to Terror of the Autons and the Sea Devils. But it is.
Well, and
coming in with a bullet to 78.
And you love the unit, stories, and this is a full on unit orgy. I think is the right way to phrase it. Yeah.
That's what we'd all like to see. But anyway, little middle of the pack for both of them, but the God Complex higher, and Mind of Evil a little lower.
We're not far off. So I've got the God Complex at number 63. I've got Around Fires of Pompeii, The Quiet Dead, just above The Enders of Tara, which seems weird that's there, but anyway, must have been in a good mood. It's a good story. Solid performance. Matt Smith is great. I love Rita. I think Amy and Roy are fantastic. I like David Williams. I think it's an interesting story. I'm docking it points for it should be scarier. It's like, all right, you're gonna talk about fears. You're gonna put it in the Shining Hotel, and I wanted it to be a little more scary. And they're willing to go for this interesting imagery and stuff like that. So I got it. But it's good. It's a solid story. I also am like, again, we're getting to the end of the season. We would have known that after this, there are only 2 more stories left, and I think it's starting to get a little like, hey, you set up a really major story arc at the beginning. The Doctor is dead, and we haven't mentioned it for a while.
No, they really haven't.
Should probably bring that back in.
And by the way, they made a bunch of progress on it really early. They did like 4 or 5 episodes where it was like, boom, boom, boom. Here's a bunch of stuff, and then now they've left it for about
is everybody? You guys want to hear about that. It's like a person telling a story. It's like, what you guys want? Fine, all right. Mind of Evil. I've got it in the. I realize this is ranking after. It's in the evil section. There's Planet of Evil,
Sure.
Face of Evil, and then just a little bit below the Mind of Evil. So it's in the
Huh.
evil ghetto. I've got it at number 81.
It's just above Evil of the Daleks.
Exactly. It's in the evil area. And maybe that's where I've gotten to in terms of ranking. I'm going to write when all this is over. I'm going to analyze my rankings and write a scathing takedown of myself on this idiot. It makes no sense. No, it is a solid workmanlike unit, Third Doctor story. It doesn't make a ton of sense, but it's made with conviction. It's just like, damn it, this is the story. It's gonna. I don't know what's going on, but they're raiding a prison, and now they're gonna blow up a missile, and we're gonna do that incredibly convincing. We're gonna put a lot of effort into all of that. Why they're doing it, or how it fits into the larger narrative.
We'll sort it out
clear.
later. We'll figure it out.
But it's going to be good. We're doing it really well, whatever it is. And so, yeah, I think that's, so yeah, it's just like, all right. And maybe what I've got there is it's like a lot like Death of Daleks, which is just like, it feels like a Doctor Who story. It doesn't fully make sense, but everybody on board seems to really think they were making a Doctor Who story, and they did it with authority, and that's why I got it there. So it's number 81 for me.
Or why don't we combine these rankings using math and complex algorithms?
Yeah.
Put it in this computer here, and we find that the God Complex is tied for 43 with Night Terrors. Actually, very recent.
Yeah, I definitely think I equate the two of them together. I feel like they're very similar. Possibly
we ranked them very similarly, albeit in different places. You ranked
we did.
Both of those around 60, and I ranked both of mine around 40, and it ends up at 43 because my rankings are more powerful. Then we have the Might of Evil. We ranked very similarly ourselves, and it ends up at 88, just below the End of Time and just above A Good Man Goes to War, which is a very recent one we also just watched.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we have a good list here. I mean, look, honestly, if you're using our list, we ranked both of these in a place where it's like we're basically like, yeah, don't watch that. Because it's not anywhere near the top 10, and then I feel like
prioritize it.
But I feel like the bottom 10 and the top 10, like, because the bottom 10 is the place you go where you're like, ooh, what's this? Why is this the bottom?
Right.
Like, I want to watch Meglos. I want to watch The Smugglers. Let's get in here.
Yeah.
But anyway, so look,
they're in my. See, you don't have the history, so you don't have the Doctor Who comfort food section, and they're in my comfort, and they're in my they're in my macaroni and cheese, Kraft macaroni and cheese section. Nobody should eat it or wants to eat it. But you do eat it every once in a while. You just do eat it, and that's where these are. They're in my. I don't wake up in the morning, or I don't wake up at 2:00 in the morning going, I've got to see the Mind of Evil.
I'll be very interested.
I'll start watching it at some point and just be like, I'll shovel this down.
when this is all said and done, which if we figured it out at some point, but I don't know, it'll be like another two more years or something like that, and I'll have watched all of the classic Who. I wonder what, if any of, and the NuWho. But what if any of those will I return? What if I will want to be like, let me put that on, because right now it's like, no, I don't ever do that. I wouldn't do that, because if I was going to have time to watch Doctor Who, I'd watch the next thing, so it would be done for the podcast. But
I picture you. I think in 20 years, because we'll still be friends probably. I've read a thing where once you're friends for 7 years, you're basically stuck with each other.
Okay.
And I picture you bolting upright in the middle of the night in your 60s and being like, I want to watch there's a black and white one with the Cybermen are in a tomb. And I'll be like, it's Tomb of the Cybermen. You're like, that's the one. And then you'll put it on your little mind cube that beams it straight into your brain. And then you'll instantly watch the whole thing and then go back to sleep. You're like, thank you. And then go back to sleep. I feel like that'll be, I'll just vaguely remember a few of them.
I picture myself more wandering by Doctor Who conventions and talking like Norm Macdonald, hey, you guys talking about Cybermen there? Yeah, I watched those Cybermen. Those are good. Good
I'm
ones aside.
digression. Since you brought it up, I am reading Norm Macdonald's book based on
Oh
a true
yes.
story or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's delightful. It's bizarre, but you have to read it in Norm Macdonald's voice. And at one
Right.
point, he's got a whole thing about like how I think he was defending a friend of his. And he's basically like, I'm gonna be. I like that Ben Matlock guy. He's a good lawyer. I'll be like him. And I'm going to reference this blah blah, and I'm going to say that this other person is Hitler because if I've learned one thing in my life, juries hate Hitler. I'm just like, oh Norm, you're a man. Anyway, folks, watch
Norm
Norm Macdonald.
Macdonald, get into it. Dead, just
Dead.
like the Queen.
Yeah,
Norm
right.
Macdonald,
But
guys.
less recently.
You can head to our website mindprobe.show. You can
There's a
email
plethora
us.
of information on there.
A plethora of information. You can email us, Porter at mindprobe.show, John at mindprobe.show.
We won't look at it or answer it, but you can send a message there if that makes you
I'll
feel
look
better.
at it. I'll answer it. I don't know.
Okay.
Paul wrote us.
Yeah,
At
Paul
our
writes.
you can go to the website though if you want to see the watch order, if you want to see the rankings. You can subscribe to our podcast, which we'd love it if you did. We'd love it if you told a friend or two about the podcast. We'd really appreciate that. Or if you want to leave a ranking on iTunes or Spotify, things like that, that always helps us out. John, what do we have in store for the next episode of this podcast?
Okay, well, so I was checking with Paul.
Yes.
Because he WhatsApps me. He says Ghostlight, which is a couple stories ago. Recently, we did two episodes of the podcast ago. He says it's a bit of a mess, and then he has a monkey holding its hands over its eyes. I don't know what that means.
Don't look.
And he says, but fun. And then we talk about Ghostlight, have a soft spot. McCoy is younger. And then we talk a lot about how Porter struggles through the 6-parters. We talk a lot about you. And Paul said, I can't blame him. I've been surprised, but classic Who can be a real struggle. At least now I can blame ADHD. So, a little nice, you had some excuse as to how it was difficult to get through Who. So none of us have an excuse. But
this is true. I didn't mention that. He wrote me on Twitter. Paul reaches out on all formats. The rest of you guys,
yeah,
I don't know what you're doing. You can't even get an email
stoic
together.
And stone-faced and silent. Like
Paul's tweeting us. He's WhatsApping. He's emailing. I mean, good Lord. I mean, this is really something here. But he mentioned what similar what you said about the Ghostlight.
No.
And then he says he's going to be interested to hear what I have to say about the Chibnall area.
That's we gotta we got another doctor to go before we get there because Peter Capaldi's coming up.
I know.
We haven't even gotten to Peter Capaldi.
No, what he says also, this is like some inside of baseball, is because this was again that episode where we were difficult to find a copy of it. And he says that he can't legally stream any classic Doctor Who in the EU because I guess BritBox just isn't even available in the EU.
Yeah, the license is not everywhere. And so obviously to protect Paul, we're going to say that he is not watching any of the classic.
Right, so
Doctor
he just
Who.
never does, and
yeah, he just sits quietly with his hands folded on his lap, and certainly is not breaking the law to watch Doctor Who.
Oh boy!
Which is interesting because folks, or Porter, your folks, if you're gonna watch the next one, you might have to think about violating the law. Because what it's toys. We're talking about toys, folks. We're going to a toy store. It's time to lighten up, have a little fun. And we are going next. So Amy and Rory have left. Like they're gone. They're out the door. Amy and Rory are left and gone.
So we're gonna finally move the plot forward.
Never mentioned again, except in one more episode. But you know what? To ease the loss, we've got James Corden coming back.
Hey,
we have closing time
as the same character.
Yeah, James Corden is back.
Oh.
And we got a little sequel to The Lodger. We have Closing Time, which sees Matt Smith working in a toy store. It's a little tour de force with Matt Smith. We haven't seen, Matt Smith's good in the God Compass. We haven't seen a ton of him. He has a little backseat to the companions, but and now we have him front and center. In Closing Time. And because, of course, it's set in a toy store, we've paired this with the Celestial Toymaker. Now, this is a First Doctor story. It is 4 parts, 3 of which don't exist anymore. So I've taken the original script and recorded an audio episode with me performing all the roles for you. However, you could also just find the reconstructions online. The audio, of course, exists for 1 through 3. With also, they at least for episode 2, I believe, they didn't even have the telesnaps. So the 2 and 3. So the what you can find online is badly reconstructed photos and some very bad computer animation.
Oh boy,
it's a struggle. Episode 4 is available in full on. It still exists, so you can see episode 4. This is William Hartnell. This is Stephen and Dodo. We haven't seen a Dodo since the Ark. This is an immediate hold on for that. And of course, Michael Goff is a Celestial Toymaker. And what's interesting about this story, and I won't give any more away, is because I don't know anymore, is that it is rumored that Neil Patrick Harris is taking up the mantle of the Celestial Toymaker, who has not been seen officially in the original series, since this episode. So that is some speculation that this is the part that he's playing in the upcoming series, but not confirmed. So this is good backstory for that. So yeah, Closing Time and the Celestial Toymaker. Toys.
All right. Well, here's
kids' toys, not sex toys.
Here,
clarify for people who are going to tune in.
Okay.
For people who listen with their kids,
yeah,
it's not going to be a lot of dildo talk.
That's good.
No more than usual.
Well, here's the dildos, and here's Neil Patrick Harris, and here's all of it.
More relevant than we'd think.
This is looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to closing out this season. And then wait, so is this season? But there's more seasons of Matt Smith.
Yes. So we've got this Closing Time. Then the Wedding River Song is the season finale.
Okay.
The big arc is closed. Then we have a Christmas episode, which is we'll get to that. Then we have half a season. We have another 2-part season, and then we get a new companion, which in the second half of the season is leading us to the big 50th anniversary. So we're closing in. We're about to hit Doctor Who's 50th year, and I'm going to struggle, but I will do my best to recreate the atmosphere of massive celebrations, like crowds in the streets outside of St. Paul's Cathedral, just celebrating Doctor Who. I mean, it was big.
Wait. It was big. So wait, after the season, Matt Smith goes a half a season without a companion?
No. Amy and Rory. It's more Amy and Rory. And then they stick around until halfway through, and then we get a new Clara. And so she's sort of the companion that leads us into the 50th. So we get after Wedding River Song, we get.
Is the 50th? Is the 50th the name of the Doctor? Is that?
The 50th is the day of.
Oh no, I see the day of the Doctor. I see it.
That's the big one. So that's the big one that we're heading. Again, I saw that in the theater in Leicester Square. I gotta convey that atmosphere.
We'll recreate it. All right, mindprobe.show, everybody. Why don't you go visit it? You goddamn.
Go home.